And this is the trump card for Trump if he really wants to achieve peace in Ukraine.
We can welcome now Yaroslav Trofimov, the chief foreign affairs correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Yaroslav, welcome back to the program.
Great to be back.
It's good to have you. So Yaroslav, is anything significant happening in Istanbul today or now?
Well, right now, nothing, because the Ukrainian delegation has just concluded its visit to Ankara, which is, an hour and change flight away from Istanbul. So the Ukrainian Defense Minister, Rustem Umerov, is flying to Istanbul on the orders of President Zelensky. So he is going to meet with the Russians either late tonight or more likely tomorrow. There is still no location and no time set for that meeting. And, the U.S. and the Turkish governments are also supposedly going to take part in this format. So nothing is really clear. But President Zelensky has made a major concession. He had been insisting on a ceasefire before any talks.
Yes.
Now, under pressure from President Trump, he has agreed to have these negotiations, the first direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine in 3 years. And as he said it very plainly in Ankara, I'm doing this as a show of respect to President Trump and to prove that we're not going to leave even a sliver of opportunity for the war to end. But he also was very clear he doesn't believe this will lead to anything.
Yeah.
And that Russia is still very much interested in continuing this war.
Yeah, so as you say, President Zelensky did agree to these talks under heavy pressure from President Trump. And now, can anything significant happen in the absence of Putin?
Well, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what orders we're giving to the Russian delegation. It's a low-level delegation. At least the head of it is a fairly low-level official, Vladimir Medinsky. But it does include the head of the Russian military intelligence. It does include the Russian deputy defense minister, and they all met with the top Russian leadership, including Putin, the day before coming to Istanbul. And so we don't quite know what the marching orders are. The head of the delegation, Vladimir Medinsky, said that he will have a constructive approach and they will seek points of convergence. So, until the meeting happens, nobody really knows what will be on the table.
And as for what happens now, we've heard President Zelensky calling for sanctions against Russia. But when this situation was put to President Trump on Air Force One, paraphrasing him slightly, he said he's been busy with business in the Gulf. What does he care? Who's in which delegation?
Well, President Trump has also said that, the agreement will only happen if Trump, meet with President Putin. So that's not happening right now. That may still happen in the future. All along with this, President Trump has been very reluctant to impose costs on Russia. And that's something that President Zelensky mentioned today. He said, the Americans are putting pressure on us all the time, and they're not putting pressure on the Russians. And that is obviously a big sore issue for the Ukrainians. And so the reason why they're doing this, the reason why they're going to this negotiation in Istanbul, is to finally try again to prove to the U.S. administration that they're doing everything they can so that the war would end through some sort of peace agreement.
Okay, good to talk to you. Thank you so much, Yaroslav Trofimov, the chief foreign affairs correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Now, I'm going to say good afternoon and welcome to Drive to Arseniy Yatseniuk, the former Prime Minister of Ukraine. Hello to you, Arseniy.
John, how are you today?
I'm well, and thank you so much for joining us. Have we now seen it demonstrated, pretty much beyond all question, that the meeting in Istanbul has turned out to be really just a charade?
Absolutely. And, let me clarify, because the previous honorable man who gave his view, I believe, is not completely right. First of all, it's crystal clear what is happening on the ground. It's a theatrical action of war criminal Putin, sending a kind of no-name delegation without any kind of intention to cut any deal with Ukraine. So the only strategic goal Putin has is to drag these negotiations into a never-ending talks. That's the first one. The second one, to make an incremental gains on the battlefield. The third one is to cozy up to President Trump The fourth one is to fracture the European Union. And the fifth one, and most important, that he hasn't changed his ultimate goals. And that's the only reason why he sent this kind of no-name delegation to Turkey. And this is completely the same list of those who participated in so-called talks in 2022. And the reason why is very clear, because he wants to stick to his previous demands, which is actually to urge Ukraine to surrender.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so obvious.
Yeah, it is difficult to dispute that analysis. Would there be any point in sitting down at all? I've seen it suggested, Arseniy, that it might be conceivably possible to agree, say, a full exchange of prisoners. Is that something worth attempting?
Well, this could happen, and that's another reason why Putin sent his military intelligence folks to these so-called talks, because he want to sell this as a kind of deliverable to President Trump, saying that, look, I am ready to negotiate. And that's what I gave you, President Trump, POWs exchange. And then that's a very generous gesture on my side, because what is happening right now, my president is fighting for the loyalty of the White House, and the same is doing war criminal Putin. So who's gonna bring President Trump on his side? And the question, John, the most important one and outstanding, is what would be the reaction of the U.S. administration? And it seems to me that the pre-agreed sanctions that had been agreed by the leaders of France, United Kingdom, Germany, and the White House, and when Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, too, joined this meeting, they evaporated. Because it was obvious that this kind of package of strong sanctions on Russia to be imposed if Russia refused to impose a 30-day ceasefire was pre-agreed. But Trump administration stepped back from the preliminary agreement, and now President Trump is trying somehow to deviate, I would say, from the previously agreed position, which is not good.
Now, when we're talking about the possibility, Arseniy, of sanctions against Russia, or further strong sanctions against Russia, I was speaking a little earlier to Mikhail Khodorkovsky, a leading critic of Russian critic of Vladimir Putin. He told me that he did not believe that Putin fears sanctions, having survived all that's been thrown at Russia so far, and that there's little more that can be done. What do you say to that?
Well, it depends. Russia is under very severe sanctions, and the U.S. administration and the European Union have imposed severe sanctions. But the thing is whether these sanctions are effective ones. So if Americans and Europeans impose secondary sanctions, these could work. That's the first issue. The second one, we need actually to provide a very comprehensive package, how to press on Russia and how to exert an enormous pressure on Russia. And this package has to consist of a number of leverages and tools. The first one is military support of Ukraine. And that's most important. And what Putin believes in, Putin clearly understands that Ukrainian military stockpiles are dwindling, and that the U.S. administration is not ready to pass any kind of additional security aid package for Ukraine. So that's the key precondition, in my humble opinion, to get more military support. That's the first issue. The second pillar is economic sanctions, because look, Russia's economy is in a quite complicated situation. It's in a dire strait. So we need to push more. And if the US administration and Lindsey Graham, he actually co-sponsored the bill in the Senate that with another 71 Senate members. So if this bill becomes the law and these secondary sanctions will be really imposed, this would be a very strong, I would say, push on Russia's economy and personally on Putin to come to the negotiating table. But what Putin is doing right now, he expects to get these kind of negotiating basics that he got in 2015, before the infamous Minsk agreements. So he wants to gain more on the battlefield. He wants to get less of Ukrainian ammo in Ukraine's stockpiles, and he wants to fracture already fragile unity in the free world.
Yeah.
That's his tactics and that's his strategy, and it is crystal clear
Yeah.
that we are not allowed to give him a chance to succeed.
Arseniy, on the question of sanctions, you mentioned the plan that had been put together by Senator Lindsey Graham, United States Senator Lindsey Graham, which he would hope to push through Congress. And there is support on both sides of the political aisle for that. One of the ideas in that package is to sanction countries that buy Russian oil. Now, that one could imagine could hurt Russia. Problem there is one of the countries that buys Russian oil is China. And America, you'd think, or the White House would be very reluctant to take that step and reignite the trade war with China, which has only just been cooled.
John, you're actually hit the target. Because I believe that China is one of the key players. Let me put it this way. China is the key player. And China is keeping silence, tight lips for a few weeks. They didn't support clearly an idea of unconditional ceasefire. President Xi went to Moscow, and as they clearly stated for the entire world that they are friends of steel, so they reiterated their strong friendship. So China is actually manipulating in the backyard, and China is clearly supporting Russia. And my gut feeling is that both Americans and Europeans have to do their utmost to press on President Xi and to China, because Putin is completely dependent on both Chinese economy and actually on Chinese geopolitical influence. And this is the key player right now. And this is the trump card for Trump if he really wants to achieve peace in Ukraine.
That's really interesting to get your thoughts, Arseniy. Thank you. Arseniy Yatseniuk, the former Prime Minister of Ukraine there.